Hello and welcome to another Java tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to continue our discussion on LaTeX for Java developers, and we looked at how to define the bare-bone text file that we need to feed to LaTeX typesetters, and we said that for these tutorials I only use PDF LaTeX, but we looked at all the LaTeX typesetters that come with the Mac Tech. When you install it, you can just search the tech bin folder and see what kind of files or what kind of binaries end with LaTeX, right? And we said that the document template, the document type, some packages as the preamble, right? The main use of preamble is just defining the packages that you want to use, and then the main document environment is begin document and end document, right? So let's head to Eclipse and try to create a class that represents a environment. So I'm going to head to Eclipse, and then in the base of LaTeX 4J, we already created a class that represents a LaTeX command. And now I want to also create a class that represents an environment. And we said that environments are very important things because you can, that's a very basic concept that LaTeX uses. So you can have an equation environment, a document environment, a figure environment, right? So obviously an environment is going to have a name, and then let's go. So the structure of an environment is something like this. So I'm going to create a maybe multi-line comment, right? So an environment is going to start with begin, and then unlike the commands, so this is the name of the environment, so name and name. But then for environments, unlike the commands, the options are typically after the begin, right? So we put the options typically here, and then so what we need to do is have also a list of a string for options, right? And as we said before, the name of so basically it's begin and end are like LaTeX commands, but the argument, they always accept one argument, right? When you're defining the environment, and the argument is just the name of the environment, right? The argument to this begin command and end command. But then we can also add some options. For example, when you create a figure environment, you can say where to put the figure. You want to put it right here, or you want to put it at the top of the page or at the bottom, right? These are the options for a figure environment. So in general, environments that we can have, for example, examples are obviously the document environment, the equation environment, equation array environment if you want to have multiple equations in the same environment, and then what else, a figure environment or table environment, etc., right? So these are all these are some of the examples of the environments that you can have. And then we're going to create a constructor, so public environment, and it obviously takes a name. We have to specify the name cannot be empty, and then we're not going to add the options, right? So we're just going to add the options later on, and then this dot name equals name. So we create the environment, and the environment is automatically going to create a begin command and end command for us. And eventually we want to override the toString method, right? So let's create a string builder environment, right? That's the a string of the environment, and then we're going to override the toString method. So source override implement methods. From the object, we're going to override the toString, and instead of calling the toString on the super, we're going to say that if environment equals null, we're going to initialize it, and then otherwise we just return environment to a string. Okay, and obviously if it's null, the first thing that we need to do, we need to create it, a string builder, right? And then what do we need to do? And we're going to say environment so at the begin, so step 1 begin, and then down the road we're going to add the end, right? So environment append backslash, because we need to escape the backslash, begin, and then we're going to have the name inside, and then plus the end of curly bracket, right? That's the first thing we need to do. And then step 2, add options, right? Options. And then with these options, what I'm going to do here is say environment, so we can check if this options is empty. So I'm going to initialize it. So options equals new array list, right? So it's not null. It's always best not to keep it null. And then we're saying that if options is empty, we're not going to do anything, right? If it's not empty, we're going to add basically environment, and then append. We're going to add a square bracket, and then plus something, a comma separated list, and then add another square bracket. And in between these, I'm going to use the string dot join. Delimiter is comma character, elements is some sort of iterable, right? So options iterable of a string, and then we should pass a string, not a character, I believe. So yeah, and then at the end we're going to do the same story here, and then end, right? And we're escaping it. But then there is something, step 3, whatever that goes inside, right? Whatever goes inside. And this goes inside is really specific to the what kind of environment we're using. Are we using a document environment, an equation environment, equation array, figure, or table? So what should we do here? The thing that we need to do here, obviously this means that we can't really create an environment by itself, right? By its name, because different environments have different names, and if then depending on which environment we use, we have to write different commands or different stuff in between the begin and end, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to have an abstract method, and then inside that abstract method, we're going to force the user or force other specific environment to implement a particular method, right? And we're going to call that here, right? So let's go abstract here. Or first, let's just test this environment to make sure that it works fine. So test command, let's create a new test class here, test environment, and let's have a main method. And here I'm going to say test1 public static void test1, and then in the test1 I'm going to say var equation is a new my environment, and then the name is equation, right? The name of the environment is the equation environment, and let's do a sysout on the equation. And begin equation, end equation. Obviously what we forgot to add a \n to go to the new line. Actually the \n is happening after adding the options, right? So \n here. And then if the option is not empty, is regardless of whether the options is empty or not, we want to add a \n, so we can just add it here, dot append \n. Again, \n is another escape character, and then at the end we're going to also add a \n, right? So let's test this again. Yeah, begin equation, end equation. The first thing that we need to do, we need to add a function to add some options here. So public add option a string option, right? And then instead of returning void, we can add the environment itself, and then return this. This is very similar to what we do for the command. In the command, we also have this option, options, add option. That's the same concept here. And now what we're going to do, so let's add an option, equation.add option, and then let's add the option. What are we going to add? Let's say if it's a figure equation, for example, I can say put it right here, so exclamation mark here, or put it at the top of the page, right? And this LaTeX tries to put it at the top of the page. So you see now it's there. The other thing for the environment, obviously at the lowest level, we want to be able to add some text to it. So basically, so what we're going to do here is maybe it's not the greatest idea to have, so I'm going to create a public, again, return environment reference, add some raw text, a string text. This is the very low level because this allows for any kind of text, right, that goes in between the begin and end. And then we probably can make this protected, and yeah, we can't make it protected, but later on when we inherit from environment to implement different types of environments like equation document, we can call this low level API. So this is like a low level API because it allows us to add any text in between the environment, right? All right, so add text. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create or initialize this inside the constructor itself. So initialize in environment, because then we can make sure, so add this begin. Let's add this begin and then add options. So we're not going to add options. Basically what we're going to do, so let's see how the best way to do it is just options, add option. Okay, we have the options, and what goes here, so here I can say environment dot append whatever text that goes in between, and then return this. Okay, so we append whatever text we put, and then we want to also append a we can also append a new line \n, but for now we're assuming that the new line is going to be inside this string itself. So this is a very low level API, right? And then the question is, how do we handle the toString? Because if we want to at some point we have to add this basically so let's see, so let's also append this. At some point we have to add the options, right? And then so we add the begin right in the constructor because we want to make sure that the begin is there, and then we want to, in the toString, we want to, so let's remove this part, and then we don't want to have the begin. It's initialized. If options is empty, we add that, and then we append the \n. Whatever goes here, it comes from the add text, right? So we don't need to have this, and then in the toString we add the end, right? Now the problem here is that if we call this once and then add the option or add some text, the end is going to be there. So that's the problem here. And I guess there are a couple of ways of doing it. The easiest way is to just build the entire environment inside the let's see, we're adding this end, and then we can either have a private method to build it, and then okay, so let's go back to the previous case. Environment append, it's so okay, so let's remove this, and we can come back to this at the later tutorial. So for now I'm going to remove this, assume that this is initialized. We can add the options, and then environment append this \n, and then whatever goes here, and then end. So we initialize this. Let's see, why is this complaining? Because we need to return a reference to this, and then the environment end. So we're adding this. Later on we have to change this, because if we build this once to a string, this is already appended to the environment. So next time we call it to a string, it's going to not function properly. But for now we can just go ahead and test it. So public static void test2, and then let's invoke test2 here. And in the test2, let's say I'm going to say var fig1 is new environment. Let's call this environment, the environment name has to be figure, and then sysout fig1 to a string. Okay, but now if I just leave it at that, it's going to give us the bare minimum figure, right? It doesn't have any options. Let's add it an option, add option. Let's say put it at the top or here. So if we say th, it means try with the putting the figure at the top of the page. If you cannot, try to put it here. So it's better to actually say ht, which means try to put it right here. If you can't, put it at the top, something like that. Okay, but then let's say we want to add a label to this figure environment so that we can later on refer to this. So I can use the bare minimum API, which is add text, right? And \/ label, it's a command, right? Label is a command, and basically what happens here is we can say fig1. So if I add it, it's not going to add the so right now it's here. Why is this why is the text is going okay, so did we make a mistake here in the environment? So we're adding, okay, that's because, okay, so adding this text, I think the problem here is that we shouldn't add the text at the directly to the environment. We should have a list, a string, just the text, and then we should also new basically array list. Okay, and then we add the okay, text dot add, or this dot text add text. All right, and then here we're going to add options, and then we check the options, we append, and we add text, any raw text that we have. So very similar to this one. So what we're going to do here is that if we're saying that if text is not empty, go ahead and append basically for each text, go ahead and append it. So for a string, so a string s in text, go ahead and do the environment.append s, right? And then we may or may not want to append a \n here. So let's try this one more time. And yeah, so we at the end, right before adding the end, yeah, we should try to have a backslash after the text ends. So we should also go to another. Again, LaTeX doesn't care because LaTeX tokenizes the raw text, but it's good to have this end at the next line, on the next line, so that it's easier for us to read the text file. And now this works fine, right? So we label this, and now this labeling is working fine. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Please stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.